are regulated and have to comply with various rules to be able to ensure that they don't breach them. We look at some cases when you breach, and in the US you have fines in the billions, you have reputational damage, and that of course will result in loss of operations. So of course most clients, you will pay the money to avoid that. So there's a cost, a preventative cost, and this is where my growth comes in. So why did I choose the road less traveled? And you must understand back then it was certainly the road less traveled. Just before I touch on this slide, I should have continued my journey that after my master's, I returned to St. Lucia and I did act as compliance and legal counsel for a bank, and then I decided once again I wanted to be an outlier to migrate to the British Virgin Islands. And the reason for that, based on my specialization, the BVI as an offshore financial center was one of the key jurisdictions for me to actually learn my practice. But when I migrated and practiced general law for a bit, while still also doing the regulatory side. So I did get an opportunity to go to court, I did get an opportunity to litigate, etc. I did win one case against the police council, back then the police council came. But why did I not pursue it? My personal story, my deciding moment was probably 8 months pregnant, and in a police station, 8 months pregnant at 11 p.m., waiting to see one of my clients. And I decided this is just not good for me. This does not mean that I needed something fabulous. There were few things about it that were not it for me that have now migrated into the regulatory space. For me personally, this is my personal story. It may not be the experience you have. What I felt when I was a litigator, there was too much uncertainty. If I dropped my feelings and I dropped it and read, well, we are coming to court and we are deciding on the matter. I could not deal with the adjournments, the other side making up other stories. I needed to see things progress. Maybe in other jurisdictions, you have that clarity and speed and efficiency in the traditional litigation firms or the litigation and the courtroom. I don't think that exists. I haven't seen it. But that was the certainty I wanted. Do I have that certainty now? What I said has haunted me. Whilst I don't litigate in court, I am definitely litigating for my clients before regulatory bodies. So last year, I made that observation, but previously I think I became very spoiled. You submit clear applications, you follow the guidelines, the regulator contacts you, application approved, etc. Now, that space has also, the jurisprudence has significantly changed, and in this space, regulators are becoming more litigious themselves. Even in the US, if you may be following with Donald Trump, when he changed over, the SEC previously was finding a lot of crypto firms, because that was a political mandate at the time. Now under Trump, he's a bit, amongst other things, but he's a bit more open to fintech. So he's now been pardoning persons, and they've now relaxed what was previously a very regulated space. So that also had a trickle-down effect, for example, in the BVI where I practiced, where previously regulators may have been very careful to have approved certain types of applications because of what the US was doing. And we would then have to fight on it that, no, we need to look at the application as it stands and not what's happening in the US. So we became litigators. And I clearly remember that day saying to my team, I thought I left the courtroom for this reason, and I'm facing the same struggles here. So you see why it's good to still hone your skills, do a bit of litigation, which is something that I will touch on, and then focus on your specialization. So look at my aim, which is to liberate you from preconceived notions about what your legal career should look like. As it stands right now for the third year, do any of you have a clear idea as to what type of law you want to practice? And that's excellent. And I'm happy to see that because there's so much out there that if it is you did have a clear idea, I also recommend you, and that's good. You know, you may stay focused because some of us, for example, if it's litigators or if you want to be a judge, some persons options outside of home. So busting the myth. So statistics, and this is of course very US based. I couldn't get enough information from the various OECS bars to put this together. Only 10 to 15% of lawyers regularly litigate. 85 to 90 are doing something else, and on our slide, we have some of the areas The reason why I suggest that you still do it is it gives you that foundation. And that was something my dad always told me. It's not that I didn't know I wanted to do, to practice. I always knew I was going to do law school. But it was always one of those things where you want to have as many options. So even if you decide later on to specialize, should anything happen, you have your legal practicing certificate as long as you maintain it current, you maintain your relevant bar membership. You can then explore other options and you know you have something that you can use that on. And non-litigation does not mean non-impactful. So my dad is now deceased. He unfortunately passed the year when I started Holy. And I'm pretty sure, he never said it, but I'm pretty sure the whole I'm going on my own and regulatory law, he didn't say it, but my dad came from a much different generation, was probably thinking, he was always very proud of me, but thinking, I know I'm a lawyer. Like, what is she doing? She's not going to court. Because every time I speak to him, he'd ask me, are you going to court? But I am with no doubt definitely a practicing attorney, except I have my area of specialization. What's important to look at non-litigation is that in our area you are preventing and finding solutions beforehand. So litigation still for us is one of the last resorts. And even when we're drafting contracts now, we do have alternative dispute resolution clauses where we provide the order in which we will now do the dispute. One, you're dealing in good faith, you use your best effort. Two, mediation. Three, then we decide between arbitration or litigation. But in most commercial law contracts right now, we're using opt-out of litigation clauses. Why? It's costly, time, etc. And depending on the type of contract, and we're talking about if you're dealing with multi-million-dollar contracts, there's also a need to keep things confidential and quiet as opposed to going into the court system. So as a result, there is a new field of knowledge which is called dispute resolution litigation. So I know that we do explore alternative dispute resolutions, but recently an attorney from one of the bigger firms reached out to me to say that she's looking for a dispute resolution attorney. I thought, what is a dispute resolution attorney? Particularly the bigger firms always like to throw out these fancy phrases. And she said litigation, negotiating with the contracts, and it made sense. What they've done is just made it very broad. So these are persons who are also trying to prevent disputes. And if it does get to the point of dispute, so they may be looking at settlement, drafting, going to meetings to also find ways to settle the dispute. But should it fail, then you're going into litigation as well. So you see how there are all of these different terms and specializations coming up. Any questions so far? So now we're going into the specialization advantage. Now, I do appreciate that my journey was different, being that I left to do my master's right after law school. And some persons may not have that opportunity or ability to do it in that way, and that's quite fine. By the grace of God, I was lucky, being that I chose a specialization, and I ended up in the BVI, which is the jurisdiction where I could have practiced what I wanted to. But I was also very determined and strategic with how I did things. So in looking at specialization, we're going to look at, well, what are the things and the avenues you should, or the skills you need to have in mind when you're exploring what are the options for specialization. What's the do's and what's the don'ts. So your journey may not be closest friends, did litigation and now sitting as judges. But we have to say that the C grade students ended up being the litigators because they were very good with their mouths. They may not be able to put the best arguments together. And there was this perception back then that your A grade students would be professors or, the board and stuff. But that's not the case, especially if you're going to be competitive. You always want to try as best as you can to aim for the best. So why am I asking you to specialize? When you deepen your expertise, it makes you more valuable. You have less competition, you're going to stand out. You definitely have a higher earning potential. You will have a more passion-driven element with your work. And we're going to look at some specializations because there's so many various specializations out there. And I don't want you to cement yourself even in your own jurisdiction. You have many regional options, you have many global options. There are many places who have done the Caribbean, the LEC bar, and if you decided I want to live in the U.S. for whatever reason, hopefully it's not under Trump, and just lower the taxes, then you can then decide to do your bar in the U.S. and work in that field. And it does make you harder to replace. I know you're trying to figure out as well, it makes you harder to replace, but it might also make it more difficult for you to find a job. And that's what you then have to balance. If it is you decided that you want to do a specialization, I'll give an example, in something with nuclear technology, the IP rights for nuclear technology. If you're going to be staying in Barbados, then you will not find a job. Then you clearly did that for fun, and hopefully you're doing some online consulting for one of the China or one of those. But you would then have to appreciate that if you have a passion for that and you wish to specialize in that, you may need to explore moving to another jurisdiction or just another continent that would afford you that ability. But it does not mean that you still can't specialize in the area, but you then have to balance it with, I may not be earning what is equivalent to that specialization if I decide to stay in Barbados or in Houston. So I provided just some examples of specialization areas. So if you're into finance, and now with finance there's a lot of crypto. There's crypto, there's tokenization. Well, you still have a contract law class going on, right? You do, right? I just thought that comes back. Now we have smart contracts. So it still includes the fundamental principles of contract law, offer and acceptance, but that's what a smart contract was done for. And why blockchain was brought in to remove the individual. Because what was felt, and this is not to scare you that it's doomsday, but what was felt was, we have people probably create contracts. You had an agreement, you put it in writing. Then guess what? Somebody breached, even though they agreed and put it in writing, and then that person wants to go to court. And we still want to put why? We have a contract, offer, acceptance, we put the terms together, consideration, we're still fighting. So why did the blockchain and smart contracts come about? Because these prisons in Dhaka and other places and the nerds have decided that we want certainty. We had a contract, there's no need
still
practices.
practices.
I remember he had something happen and then he was suspended for a little bit. But you know, he's become and enjoying being a traveling attorney as well. So
What happened was,
he did well. Yeah.
what happened was that there was a slight breach of the canons based on a statement he made, and they were supposed to suspend him. However, he applied to the GSC for them to commute that suspension because of the ongoing badge letter trial at the country. So he didn't
Okay.
get suspension.
But then, you know, he was a thorough litigator,
Yeah.
and, you know, during his break, when I was traveling, sentencing, etc., from what I was told, he was the one, you know, reviewing the contract. I think he could have easily segued and become vice entertainment law attorney, but I felt that at that point in time, it would be, well, you got me out, whatever you're going to practice, and that's fine. And most recently, I actually met an immigration attorney, Jamaican descent, that practices out in Washington, who did his visa, got his visa for the U.S. to allow him to stay and also, well, perform. Because in the U.S., there's very strict rules, even for Jamaican or any artist on a visa, you have to follow certain requirements. So she practices solely as an immigration attorney. Originally Jamaican, went to school in Jamaica, did Northern Manly, and then later did her bar in Washington, and now practices on immigration law. Doing well with ICE and everything happening at the moment. So the specialization. When I was doing the master's, one of my lecturers said that when we were trying to decide in this early orientation week, should you do a general master's or do a specialization in just a master's? He said you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And that really stuck out to me. So some of the things you want to avoid, if it is you're spread too thin and you're not really a go-to expert, you're competing with everyone. Now this is fine if you decide when you complete at law school that you're going to have a general practice area for some time. And the point of that is also to help you find out what is it that you love. And what is it you love can then evolve into a different specialization. You could even then specialize on succession planning, drafting will. You can decide to then focus on doing criminal law. You would then have to determine what is that area of specialization you want to focus on. You see, the law is so broad and can be so complex that on one hand, and something you have to bear in mind, even if you do have a litigation, everything at some point may have an opportunity to go to court. You may wonder, but that litigator would know about AI regulation, but that litigator is not required to be an AI regulatory expert. Because that litigator has a consultant in the back who is an AI regulator, who is dealing with the drafting, who is then providing that information to the litigator, and the litigator is doing the oral submission. So it's not necessary for you to then be spread so thin that if I am going to be a leading litigator on every single matter, then I need to know everything. This is where you see your King's Counsel always have the juniors, and why litigation firms always have the juniors, where financial institutions that this is a complex area. You shouldn't be doing this on your own. Trust me. I don't trust myself if I'm not in law, especially where there's a labor tribunal, which is very employee friendly. I am very quick to, I have a firm that I work with and I retain them to handle my matters. Because sometimes the lawyer cannot also be the client as well. So I also know very early because of legal risk, because I do risk management, when I also need to perhaps transfer or refer a matter out. As you see here, even specialists need specialists. So you want to ensure you have a solid understanding of general legal principles, know when to go out and seek advice, and recognize issues outside your expertise. Once again, this is also going to be something that you will face in practice. Even if you are in practice and you are doing general legal work, at that point in time, if your firm or you are running your own firm, you have decided this is, I can't transfer this matter out for whatever reason you've decided to work on it, you're then going to have to build that level of expertise. The commercial way to do it is that in your fees, which you have already identified to the client, and explain to the client, you can probably have a little clause in there that says it allows you to engage additional consultants and experts as needed. You would engage a consultant or expert in the area to be able to provide you with the relevant information for you to assess and analyze and then apply the legal principles to it. So your legal degree and hopefully your legal education certificate, I'm encouraging you to pursue, is a versatile degree and that's your career path. As you, I'm sure you appreciate, it's teaching you analysis. That's one of the key things. Identify the issue, apply the law, analyze. To this day, we're still doing that. Every single, and even in life, that's how you would just start to naturally deal with issues. You're also going to identify how to spot issues. So this part can be annoying, and a group of colleagues, we were discussing that, where a friend may come to you and say, I'll give a more recent example. Hey, I was looking to buy a boat. Okay. Yes, so then you just got the documents. So tell me about this boat. I don't know, the guy said it has a bankroll or something, I don't know. And you transferring it. It has a lead. And just, there's so many questions, it just sounds like negative. So you see, I'm spotting issues. How long has the boat been? Have you actually gotten a survey to see how it's operating? Have you gotten a survey to see there are any mechanical issues? Have you seen whether it's tied up in any other sort of things, litigation? But for that person who's very just commercially driven of, I want this boat, I know the money is going to make me. You then seem, and it's going to happen to you in your career, you then seem to be like the blocker. Like, I want to get this done. It's not that we're not going to get it done, and I find myself saying this a lot. We're going to get it done, but we're going to get it done the right way. I've actually made a personal decision to stop doing local work, as I call it, in the BVI, for that very reason. And this is just, I told Darren I'm going to sometimes be very open with you. My heart can't take it. When I tell a client not to do X, and then they do Y, and then they come back when X has happened, the Y that I said this is all that's going to happen, my personality initially became one of trying to figure it out and, I would take it on. And now, I can refer you to somebody. But I've decided I'm not going to do that. I will look at what my hourly rates are. There is a reason my hourly rate is that hourly rate because I sit down and I identify issues. I say to people, my clients pay me good money to sit down and identify the issues before they happen. Has that become a problem in personal life? When I train my teams, and that's what I tell them, when you're spotting issues and in regulatory law, we do a lot of what's called verification, which is due diligence. So the basic principle is that you always need to verify that what is being said is in fact true. So just imagine in your regular conversation, somebody just said X and your mind is just going this naturally. How do I verify that? Is that true? You develop a very questioning mind. And of course, you learn how to solve problems. So I'll tell you about my specialization and how what not to do. The law firm will write out the legal opinion. The law firm would say, this is the fact, this is what the law says, you can do this, you can't do this. The struggle in my field and where I have commercialized it is the client has gotten this legal opinion that says you can't do X. They decided, well, I'll do Y, but they don't know how to do the Y. So what my firm does is that we help, in addition to telling you what you can and can't do, we then implement the how. As a result of that, I've gone into project management, developing roadmaps, developing remediation projects to help clients figure out the how. So we don't just stop at you can and you can't, but we do the how. Can a law firm do the how? It can. The bigger law firm will tell you, no, that's a liability. We're lawyers. But remember, my background is also in compliance, where I have the operational expertise in terms of actually implementing the how. But a traditional law firm may say, what we are mandated to do is to tell you what you can and cannot do. We may not take it further and tell you how to implement the how. Unless, of course, we have a lot of disclaimers and indemnities and waivers that we're showing you how to do the how, but you can't take any action against us. You're doing it at your own risk. Some firms decide, you know what, we're just going to focus on the what you can and can't do. So we're going to reverse engineer the approach. And this is why I told you, fall in love first, then you add your degree, or you add your master's specialization. And it doesn't mean you have to do your master's. Right now, there's so many diploma courses and other certifications that you can obtain online. There's no requirement unless you know the area you want to go to, and having a master's will make you competitive. You can get an ICA diploma, you can get diplomas in AI and other various technology. And this is where I say what you can perhaps do after law school, or even now, depending if you have time, you identify an area you're passionate in. See if there are online courses on it. Even if it's a great foundation certificate that you just do, and then you can see, well, I like this. This interested me, so it might be an area I will look into further. So your transferable superpowers. What does law school actually teach you? And it's skills that are valuable virtually, and I really believe that in any context. As you know, look at lawyers, you have politicians, that seems to be the traditional roadmap. You know, most politicians appear to be lawyers. But you have so many various specialists as well. A lot of business owners also were lawyers and then went into business. The main elements here, you're looking at critical thinking. Because with critical thinking, it's really going to teach you how you're going to analyze different things. It's going to help you determine what are the pros and what are the cons for the different areas. And it's going to help you to automatically spot issues. Because that's what you're doing. When you go to law school, I guess now are you doing any case studies, or it's still essay time? Okay. So then in law school, you have a lot of case studies. And when you're reviewing the case study, step one, you're going to be pulling out what are the various issues that you're now going to then apply the law to, etc. And that's what you start doing generally. That is the skill you're being taught. So even in an essay, you have to look at the essay question to see, well, what is the issue you're asking us to focus on? What do we have to zone in on and deal with? Your research and analysis. You know you cannot get by even the LLB, far less law school, without having to do research. I'm sure many people have said this to you. If not, it's universally known. The law degree and the legal certificate just gives you the footstep. When you come out, there's still so much. You're still doing so much research. But invariably, that law degree, applying those same skills that you learned for research is what's going to then help you doing research. In my own day-to-day, and I have a slide on what my yesterday looks like, there are many times any new case law or what new legislation, etc. on the matter. Of course, communication as well, because with communication, you have to learn how to communicate both orally and also in writing. So for me, I'm communicating a lot with boards. I'm communicating a lot so with boards of directors, I'm communicating a lot with regulators and other clients. Negotiation. Do you have any courses on negotiation? Only advocacy. Okay. And negotiation is something that whether you're negotiating in contracts, whether you're negotiating settlements, whether I'm negotiating with the regulator, it's a skill that you are going to have to use. And of course, attention to detail. So your law degree and practicing certificates are your toolkits, and these tools will work everywhere. So my specialized area. So just by background, a lot of attorneys, I'll say, even the BDI would say compliance mediators, because it's a very specialized area. Now, when you hear compliance within the financial regulatory sphere, what it was way back then, like you may have heard the word a compliance officer. You are reviewing documentation, you're reviewing passports, you're doing checks on databases to see if people have any hits, etc. So what we've done now is that financial regulatory law, similar to how you have a civil code in your various jurisdictions or your white book in the UK or your civil procedural rules, in regulatory law we have for the BVI a regulatory code. And aside from the regulatory code, we have different like investment business legislation, a whole suite of AML, terrorist financing and proliferation financing legislation. We have sanctions guidelines. So these would be the equivalent to the criminal law in your regular ecosystem. So in our ecosystem, this is what that is comprised of. So I mentioned earlier, what do I actually do? I help financial institutions follow the rules. Why? The rules are extremely complex. We also help ultra-high net worth individuals who seek to establish regulated or unregulated businesses. You might wonder why or how do ultra-high net worth persons now why would you come to a financial regulatory person? And it was interesting how it happened and how I pivoted and used the skills I had to be able to now market to the ultra-high net worth individuals. You see, ultra-high net worth people don't want to lose money. They don't want to be paying those fines. So we want to know how to do it and how to do it right. The perception that ultra-high net worth people are people just in the back saying, oh no, you know, it's a fine, this is fine. They are the cheapest people around. They will spend a good buck, but they don't want to lose money. So first of all, they want to do things the right way. So even as acting as general counsel, it may not be in an area that's my specialization, but I would then, using risk assessment, know what risks we need to avoid, spot the issues, and then as lead counsel for the family offices, I would then engage other attorneys to be able to advise on the matter. The head, for example, the billionaire himself may not want to have to deal with, he's not an attorney, she was not an attorney, they don't want to have to deal with other attorneys who are breaking down complex issues. So we're the ones dealing with the attorneys, making the decisions. We know what the client ultimately wants, but that's where we now translate that information to the client in bite-sized pieces. This is what needs to be done, this is what we can't do, what's your decision? And we're negotiating. So I wanted to give an example of just some of the fines that truly exist and have been paid. As you see, 3 billion, and these names are not small names. No, these are some of the leading banking institutions, even for high net worth persons. So these fines are not small. So what my role is, I prevent the next financial or financial crime scandal, or sometimes, I'm cleaning up the mess. What do you mean by cleaning up the mess? Remember with Olivia Pope's scandal, she was called when there was a crisis. In my area, as it was said, now developed a new area called regulatory crisis management. Why? Because clients will either get much get annoyed if I'm in company that's just identifying all the issues. I know what the issue is, and this is always when I train my team what's next. Even in terms of my language for my clients, it becomes, this is the solution, this is what we need to do. So I've had previously on my team, for example, an attorney who came strictly from a litigation background. And when we were engaging with the client or the regulator, it would be, in my humble opinion, this is that very long verbiage. And I remember, training her, crossing it up, training her, and just like, in 5 sentences, you need to get to the point. Not respectfulness, you still have to be very clear, but also, you would also, and may have realized that the language from the all-in-one reports to the language we practice now, and actually the new rules all speak of, you need to have clear language. You don't need to have to go all around the dock and using, the most complex words. You just get straight to the point. Also for us, you have to know, for me, for my clients, and that's now our mission statement, are ultra high net worth individuals. They're the managing directors or CEOs of very well established businesses. They are thinking about the bottom line. As much as compliance is a huge issue they have to deal with, they're also dealing with how do I keep the doors open, how do I keep the revenue, what are the sort of crises going on. So I don't have all day to get before the board to speak about why my issue is so big and just going round and round. I need to be able to come, this is the problem and this is the solution. So my language is always, what is the solution? And my personality too has then become with clients, calming them down, okay, this is the problem, let's find the solution. I touched on this. So I did an element of what did I actually do. So it wasn't yesterday, it was the day prior because I traveled yesterday. So I engaged a Russian counsel on the review of a 15-tier corporate legal structure, reviewing the structure to determine what AML risks and were there. And separately, I would advise counsel on the particular transaction. So in this transaction, the client wanted to onboard an underlying BVI company, and the BVI company is ultimately actually owned by somebody on a sanctions list, on the UK sanctions list. However, the sanctions law does allow that if the company is ultimately owned by somebody on the sanctions list, as long as they're owning less than 50%, the company is not deemed a sanctioned entity. So as I mentioned, it's 15 tiers. So in each of these 15 tiers, there's specific calculations. So guess what? The math I told you I never touched, it came back to haunt me. Frankly, I can use a calculator where we're using the multiplication method, where literally I have my Olivia Pope moment. So in my office, my team would have the layer right up to the 15, and then we're going through to calculate on what is the indirect level of ownership of the sanctioned person. Now, I know I said that, well, but we have a Russian legal opinion because the structures are Russian, and it's Russian law. Russian law has different laws, just like how BVI companies, not BVI, well, the BVI company uses the standard English company, separate legal personality. We know all the fundamentals. They're different in different jurisdictions. That changes. It's not the same legal concept, which is why we get an expert from Russia to advise on that. But can we take the experts from Russia's advice? So this is where what we're doing is now vetting and verifying everything that has been claimed by the Russian legal opinion. I also looked at the UK sanctions opinion. Why? Because clearly, the clients that I deal with now, because of the specialization I am in, taking on another sanctioned person. So for some people, even in compliance, it becomes, you're dealing with sanctioned people. The law doesn't say you can't deal with them. There's a way you can deal with them. But some clients, being financial institutions, may decide, you know what, this is too high risk, we're not going to deal with them. But we may have other clients who have decided we will take you on as a high-risk client, and we will charge the fees out of you to manage you as a high-risk client. So as a result of that, this is the hourly rate. The reason I did put my hourly rate is Darian always gets excited. I don't know what it is. I don't know if you all have, or you get to that level when you get to know school of what is the hourly rate. I will say the BVI, actually, my area is one of the highest hourly rates because commercial lawyers, and not just for BVI, there's so many commercial lawyers. So you can't price yourself out of the market because there's so many. There are not that many regulatory attorneys at all. So this is where our prices tend to be on the higher end. We're almost to the end. I've already touched on what are some of the transferable legal skills you're going to use: your legal writing, your persuasive writing. And when, even at law school, when you're drafting submissions, when I practiced for the first year in the BVI as a litigation attorney, this is what you're doing in your drafting, in your pleadings, you're persuading. But I'm doing the same thing right now, just not to a court. I'm not filing my documents with the court, but I am filing those documents either with the regulator or I'm drafting a memorandum to the board trying to persuade them on why they should go with a certain decision that I am proposing. And this is some of the areas the persuasive writing comes in with some of our clients. They may be fine, sometimes not have any, but I do like also taking on clients who were not fine under our watch, but they were fine, and we then take them on to do a cleanup. I call that the Olivia Pope client scandal. Recently, I also deal, and just I think this is a good example of another area of specialization. So I also sit as a board member on another wealth management company, a trust company. And recently, that trust company only deals with very high net worth clients. They operate in the UK, South Africa, Germany, Switzerland. And a few months ago, a journalist reached out to them to say that they were going to publish this information about one of the clients because we manage the trust for these clients, for that client. And when you look at the names of Bin Hadid, etc., you know these types of names. And what's impressive, and you have to appreciate, the board is comprised of maybe 3 other very, much more senior attorneys, went to Oxford, Cambridge. This is not a situation of, oh my gosh, yes, we need to do X. This board, and you don't know how many of you are familiar with the UK firms. You have heard Mishkondaria. Mishkondaria is like the firm for very high-end, high money, old money. Mishkondaria would represent like the royal family, etc. So this firm, they're like, no, we need to send it to Mishkon. And what they're sending to Mishkon is not, hey, draft a cease and desist to this journalist. No. Mishkon has a section of the law firm which is focusing on reputational rights. And what that law firm was doing was not saying something about cease and desist because, strategically, you don't engage, this is what I learned, you don't engage, and this is coming from attorneys, with journalists now, if that sort of battle. It was very simple. You're engaging just to say, we've received your request. Please tell us what information it is you have so that we can discuss further. They never came back also, obviously, because they saw Mishkondaria. But then you're thinking, attorneys, no. A journalist is now threatening to take us to publication. And that firm is like, no, there's a whole department that deals with because of the clients they deal with. You would think this is not a marketing or a strategic brand consultant that you're sending it to. It's a law firm that has a department of lawyers that determine, well, how do we write this 3-line response? This 3-line response is so important because it says so much without not saying anything as well. Because you could say so much and say the wrong thing, which is what gets you in the press. You can say so much and say the wrong thing, which if it goes to court, you put your foot in the mouth. So that was a very, even for me, as much as I speak about specialization, such a profound example of another element of specialization, just looking at regulatory crises, or not regulatory, sorry, reputational crisis management. And it is perhaps because I have that sort of background and that exposure, why I myself, if I'm met with certain crises, the first thing I do is spot the issue. If it's something outside of my area, I then instruct another firm to manage it. So what are my tips to you for shaping your career? that has sufficient attorneys in the BVI. Why? The BVI has a lot of the bigger law firms have offices all over the globe. So what started happening, your Hong Kong office is issuing BVI legal opinion, and there's a whole commercial element. The BVI legal opinion issued from the Hong Kong office is probably going to cost 10 times less than the BVI. Because Hong Kong, the rates are actually less because there's more resources. So the BVI then has to put certain things in place to try to regulate it. Certain jurisdictions, unfortunately, as you know, if you've done your law in the UK, then you may not be able to have it converted, or you would have automatically converted, you would have to do a conversion course. So that's a decision you will have to make depending on the direction you want to go. What I would urge you is, just always consider you don't want to close off your options too early. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Practice generally. So I stood today and told you all the reasons why I would like to encourage you to consider specializing, but there's a way to do that. And I did say to you, my way, I was blessed to have been able to pursue my path without actually working practicing generally for a long time. But practice generally first to help you determine what is the area that you really do like. Some of you may already have worked previously and you're now a more mature student and you're now starting law, so you already have decided what's the area you want to specialize in, and that's fine. Test drive various types of work and discover what energizes you, because you have to make an informed decision about specialization. What I don't like to see is a lot of persons specializing just for the sake of saying, I have a master's. And you look at what they're practicing, and they're not practicing in the corporate and commercial. For me, maybe I've become a little bit, I'll call it almost, not bougie, it's a little bit like, no, don't just specialize to say, oh, I have a master's. Make it purposeful. A master's it costs money, so you don't want to just invest the time and the sacrifices and the money just for saying you have a master's. You want it to be something that you actually enjoy and you're practicing. When you choose your specialization, think outside the box. So my dad, I was blessed, and my mom always said, the world is your oyster. And just something that I'm doing more of is a lot of mentoring. Because I was blessed with parents and an environment where I knew I could do anything I wanted to. You could not tell me. To this day, you cannot tell me that I cannot do something. I mean, I have sat at the table with billionaires, but I'm still a very down-to-earth person. Would you have thought, when I was sitting in this mood court, that that's something that I would have been thinking? Not at all. But you have to be strategic, you have to have that drive, and you have to have that determination. For any of you sitting here, there is nothing you cannot do. At one point, thinking about it, I wanted to work in the UN. And that was my big drive, and I always said, if I'm going to the UN, I'm going to be Secretary General. And there's nothing. My daughter, she wants to be, right now I've trained her, if you want to work in the UN, you are going to be Secretary General. What I am saying is that always shoot for the top. Do not believe based on your circumstance. Do not believe that based on the fact that you are from the Caribbean, that you're from smaller countries. We have so much precedent where we have seen it happen, so it can also happen to you. So that's very important. I don't want you to limit yourself. The fact that you got into Cahill and you are doing this course and you're now going to do the legal education certificate already says a lot about your first legal job won't be a lot. I know only one person, well, in the media that is, who, when she joined her firm, she remained with that firm, ended at a partner level now. But that may not be everybody. I've also known persons who start and it may not work out, and that's fine. Don't get, because of the 5-year plan, it becomes different when you get into practice. Because when you get into practice, you may then have your new 5-year plan. It might be that once you started, in these 5 years, I want to determine or discover what is the area of specialization, or you may decide in 5 years, I want to become senior associate. By year 7, I want to be counsel, and by year 10, I want to be partner. So you may have a wonderful roadmap right there. But for those of you who are young, I'm not saying that it won't work. Especially females, you then have to decide whether to pick a child or not, children, and all of these things. So it's good to have a plan. It's very good. The reason you need to have a plan, it will then help you determine how you're going to pivot in terms of your legal career. But I just don't want you to think that whatever you started off at is where you're going to finish. I do have a very good friend here, and at quite a young age, she made it to partner of a very reputable law firm here. And just as she got promoted, she declined it, and she went to work with a regional organization as general counsel. But she had decided, this was it for me. And something I find a lot with persons at my level, we get to a certain place and we now at a place of, okay, is this what it is here? The fulfillment is there, but what's next? But that only comes later on because I had a very good plan. I knew at a certain age this is what I wanted to get. And where I'm at now is allowing me an opportunity to decide, well, what's next? What's my next exploration point? But it came from being very strategic in the beginning, staying committed. My very first legal job, but it was the second when I went to BBI, did not end well at all. And it could have resulted in me questioning myself. But you also have to be prepared now when you leave law school and you now go into the office politics, the country politics, depending where you go, you're navigating all of these other things. If you know what you want to do, stay put. Because that's how God works, how society works. Things will be aimed at you to derail you, and this is why you have to have that self-determination to be able to remain on that course. Pivoting is healthy. So if something derails you and you realize, I just don't like litigation. Again, going to court, I was getting annoyed going to magistrate's court, but back then I said, I really did not work so hard at school to be dealing with this nonsense. That was me. Some of my colleagues had a passion. They loved coming to magistrate's court and, it's like this whole flamboyant showing off and milling, and I'm just home. It's not nice. Like, I have at least 5 more briefs to go back into. I was always this person based on efficiency. We need to get it done. I need to get it done. I don't have all time to stay in court and what's delayed. That was not me. But we don't need the legal system. We need litigators. So this is not saying that we shouldn't do that. It just wasn't for me. And then I pivoted. And there's nothing wrong with pivoting. And that's where also having a plan, you also have to have that plan, not too close to your chest that it does not allow you to be able to pivot. If you then come across another area that you probably like, that you can explore, or if you realize what you learned in law school about what you thought that subject was, and when you came out and you're now practicing it, it's really not that. And your dream was to pursue that. Give us a fair chance. But if you decide this is not it, it is fine. You have not failed. Because I've also observed in my profession where persons, especially if you're somebody who you're very driven, you take that to heart and then you spend probably a long time, losing time, trying to get over that disappointment. But it will happen to some of you where you face the realization that this is not it, or this thing that I build your unique value proposition. Because right now I'm blending what I learned in litigation, what I learned in persuasive writing, what I learned as a compliance professional, what I learned helping run a business for the Liechtenstein case because I was part of management. I had to deal with operational issues. That is how I learned how to bring solutions into the legal area. So my key takeaways, I put it in bullet points, and you do get the slides after. Law will open more doors than you imagine. The courtroom is really just one room in really a mansion of opportunities. Specialization is powerful. You get to find what excites you, and then you can apply the legal skills to it. Practice broadly, then specialize strategically. So use your early years to explore and discover what your passion is. Your transferable skills are valuable everywhere. You're dealing with critical thinking, analysis, persuasion. Recently I was in the US and I met a real estate attorney who literally just practices real estate in Miami. They're just dealing with, Miami has so many various developments and they're so complex as well. They just focus on real estate. And he's actually also Jamaican origin as well. So this is also saying to you, I'm not trying to have a brain where people just leaving the jurisdiction, but you can think broadly as well to anywhere in the world. Create your own path if necessary. And I really believe that's what I have been able to do with Goldie. Because with Goldie, I've been able to, and how I stand out against the traditional law firms is once again being able to say that we're not just a legal services firm. We don't just tell you what you can and can't do, but we roll out the how. We roll out the solutions and how to do it. And that has been me creating my own path. Because that definitely did not exist in 2017 when I went out on my own. I just was trying to find a way to blend what I was doing in terms of operations with my legal skills. Think globally, not just locally. Balance depth with breadth. Master of one, competence in many. It's important to know when to refer. So this will make more sense to you probably when you started practicing. Design your career around your values and passions. And I put this 40 plus years. It's not saying at 40 you reach your peak. Add 40 to whenever you do start actually practicing. Alright? So this is going to be your life. So make it a meaningful one. That's the end of my presentation. None?
Earlier presentation, you spoke a little bit about finance tech and how, in terms of US cryptocurrency, how with the political changes how we have to run cryptocurrency. Right, so my question to you is how are currency regulators adapting from that framework to the rise of cryptocurrency and that aspect?
A very good question. So I can go back to, let's see, 2017 is when we had this Irma. When I moved to St. Lucia, I was actually the first person to bring in back then a crypto firm. Didn't last very long because we had to migrate them to the Seychelles. Why? Because the ECCB was not permitting the regulation of that space. Fast forward in 2021, we were the first firm, as you heard, to get the sandbox license application. What's the sandbox license application? So the BVI and Cayman were one of the first regional jurisdictions to actually allow the sandbox. The sandbox, when you think about it, is somewhere where you come to play. So what it is, it allowed cryptocurrency firms to apply for a sandbox license to come and test it. And while they're testing it, there's certain regulatory approvals. We surrendered that license last year. Why? Because it's taking, the Caribbean, to answer your question, is taking a very long time to adapt. And it's not a scenario where we can say, blame the regulators. I've had my moments of saying that. digitization, technology, people are moving very quickly. These are, and cryptocurrency exchanges are sometimes turning in terms of revenue over a million, guess, a multi-million, guess how often? How often do you think they're turning this over monthly, annually? Daily. Some of these crypto funds, that is the amount that is being turned around daily. So they don't have time to wait. The challenge for regulators, and just looking at our geopolitical climate, within the banking sector and the ECCB, unfortunately, we also have to then deal with the superpowers, the U.S. At the time, the U.S. didn't want to see digitization. They didn't want crypto. The reason why they didn't want crypto too, when you think about this, there's a lot of lobbying in the background. The Wells Fargo, the Goldman Sachs, or Bank of America, they're not out there lobbying with the politicians saying, yes, bring crypto. Why would they say that? That's going to end the banking business. That's the purpose of crypto. The purpose of blockchain and financial, and was to allow financial inclusion, because the traditional banking sectors were not and are still not available in a lot of countries. When you look at China, even the African continent, there are a lot of persons that are not what we call bankable. So a lot of the traditional firms, traditional banking institutions who have the money would lobby that we do not want this type of technology. Of course, financial crime didn't help. So you may have heard some of the biggest scams and hacks, especially when you're looking at crypto, has been not, I just had a great thought. North Korea. North Korea has actually used what's called pig farming to hack multi-billions in cryptocurrency that is used to finance their nuclear technology. And these are things that, in my field, we are looking at all the time. So this is not something remote. We've actually also been able to identify elements in the region where you have a lot of proliferation financing and terrorist financing camps. Unfortunately for the Caribbean, again, the geopolitical factors were small fries. So even you would have heard about the FATF and blacklisting. BVI currently is on a gray list. Why? BVI is one of the most regulated jurisdictions in the world. It is so easy to go to. Any one of you can go to the U.S. tomorrow to Delaware and open a company in Delaware with hardly any KYC. Guess what? Delaware is in the U.S. The U.S. does not regulate itself. It's very easy, and that's what Prime Minister Modi has really challenged. It's very easy, and this is what's happening. A lot of these global, the big boys club, as we call them, it's easy for them to point and put gray lists and other sanctions on the smaller jurisdictions. Why? A lot of the wealthy transfer their money to offshore companies to be able to, there's something called tax evasion and tax avoidance, you'll learn later on. Tax avoidance, which is legal. Tax evasion is not illegal. So what has happened because of those political elements, regions like the Caribbean, they can't fight it. The BVI has done a fairly good job. It's a bit of an outlier, but that's also because historically they've been in the financial services for quite a bit of time. So only the BVI and Cayman, I would say, have really made progress, albeit quite limited in terms of having proper regulation. The ECCB, certain jurisdictions have, I know Jamaica, Dominica has allowed some sort of crypto banks to come in. The problem we have is in the region we also have a lot of corruption. So this is where then you have financial crime occurring, and then it makes it easy for the bigger countries to say, yes, you have this bank that you gave a license. When you look through the bank, maybe there's a CIP element, and maybe that CIP element has some other handled things, then it becomes no. This is where you may have heard the word de-risking. So what de-risking is, and that's a challenge the Caribbean countries have. You're in Barbados. Do you have a lot of access to U.S. dollar? And what's our universal currency? The U.S. for now, right? And that's how the big countries, for what's happening in the U.S., literally choke us at the neck. Because they then say to banks and the correspondent banks, you can't do this, you can't do that, and it's very then threaten us. So what will happen, they would then say, if you pass this, or you have weak regulation, we're going to then affect the correspondent banking relationship. We're going to then say Barbados is high risk. And at one point, Barbados was on the gray list too. You're high risk, so any transaction going to Barbados now is a bit, it's high risk. You have all of this extra due diligence checks. It makes it harder even if your passports when you travel because then now there are more sanctions. So unfortunately for us in the region, it is harder, but I would say the jurisdictions that have made the most progress is BVI. And when I give the example of me now fighting, not in court, but with the regulator, that's a very good example of this. Every other week I've decided I'm not doing any more fintech because I find myself litigating once more. Yeah, but it's challenging. So we've made little progress, and it's just really the geopolitical elements around it. You like to have another thought? Okay, very sorry. Any more questions? So what sort of special, anybody here once has decided or just an idea of a specialization you want to explore? Are you still very open? Okay. And why compliance and risk? And it's a good career. You know what I say to people with compliance, there are financial institutions everywhere. You don't have to have like a UK legal practicing certificate to go, to practice compliance. Right now, I work closely, one of the consultants for both visas based in UAE and Abu Dhabi, and Georgia, she's St. Lucian, studied in the UK. But right now, the world has transformed, and because of digitization, you can work in so many jurisdictions where you're learning a new law, a new concept. With compliance, quite frankly, you'll never be out of a job because you always have to have compliance persons. Whether in the banks, another area of compliance is medical compliance. So you have lawyers or compliance persons that are working with some of these very big medical hospitals, etc., that's looking at regulation. Are you complying with the relevant standards? A lot of the pharmaceutical companies will also have compliance people as well. And just as I did, I think, made it a little bit, enhanced the word from compliance, so just risk to financial, regulatory, and compliance. Well, I hope there are no questions. I'm sorry. I don't have a question. Oh, this is good. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you all for having me. And what I will do is Darren can share my email address. As I said, mentoring is something that I'm doing more of. So you can feel free to reach out to me. Just ask any questions. I'm on Instagram and those things. That's on my personal page. So you can reach out to me, just any questions, because it's, as I said, I was blessed to have a good support system, and that's one of the reasons for me with mentoring. I want to be able to now share the blessings and the gifts that I was blessed with. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. out to me. What I would say, I would have limited internship opportunity, but I definitely would. But the good thing, a lot of the law schools are also my clients, and this is all part of the mentoring that I'm doing, and I'd be happy to also assist people in terms of placements with other firms as well. Of course, if you do know you do want to specialize in this area, that's no problem in terms of looking at more. Fellow students, we're honored to welcome back our esteemed speaker, Ms. Shamini to our honor roster today. It's fitting that she's determined to share her expertise with us, imparting valuable knowledge to the next generation of lawyers and financial experts who will be So we extend our heartfelt gratitude for your inspiring presentation. Your insights have undoubtedly broadened our understanding of the legal profession, showcasing its vast scope and opportunities. You've helped us realize that law is a diverse industry, offering numerous paths to explore. After this presentation, you have definitely achieved your goal of liberating us from preconceived notions about what a law career should look like. You have also ensured that this cohort right here will be the ones who want to have deeper expertise, stand out, the ones who will have a higher earning potential, and be passion-driven, as well as being partners with youth. You have motivated us to be masters of one, yet competent in many. Thank you for your time, expertise, and passion. We appreciate those like you who share not only where they have reached or what they have achieved, but how they achieved it. You have inspired and